Hi, I'm Gabe Smith, and I'm the Executive Director here at Starkville Community Theatre. Starkville Community Theatre is a year-round, nonprofit performing arts organization right in the downtown heart of Starkville, Mississippi. Every show that we do is performed, directed, and staffed entirely by volunteers. There is only one employee, who is me. Now, I am very, very lucky to work here at Starkville Community Theatre, because before I ever had this job, before the job was available, I had acted and directed and helped backstage over the years for about 15 years before the job became open. And now that I have it, I count myself incredibly thankful every day to have it. One of the things you get to do in theater, especially a year-round theater like we are, is that you are constantly moving from one story to another. And as someone who enjoys telling stories, that's great for me. Whatever I'm working on in a 2-month period, when I reach the end of that period, it's over. You wipe your hands and you move on to the next one. And that is a very gratifying place to be. Now, as a storyteller, I have realized something about myself over the years, whether I'm acting in shows, directing, or occasionally writing. And that is that I realized that I don't think my particular talent is in the creation of new material from whole cloth. If you put me on the spot and say, Gabe, tell me a story, or tell me a joke, or if you ask me point blank, hey, what's your favorite this or that? What's your favorite movie? What's your favorite song? What's your favorite type of food? I go, ooh, I don't know. I usually don't have an answer to that. That's not where my particular talent lies. If you give me the whole cloth, I struggle with knowing exactly what about the cloth to tell you. However, I feel like my talent is in synthesizing things, in taking something as a whole, whether it's as an actor in a show, taking a script, examining the whole thing and what it's trying to do, and then picking it apart, looking at each individual piece, and then for an audience or for a person I'm telling a story to put all those pieces back together, and now the whole is a new thing that also includes my own perspective, which means that now I've taken the thing that already existed, but now it has little pieces of me attached to it, which means it now contains my frailty, my sense of humor, my yearning for understanding, my losses, my hopes, and I've created a new thing from that old thing. Now, when you're talking about telling a story, how do you tell a story that way? By tearing it apart. So I came into the theater world as an actor first, so I want to talk about it a little bit from that perspective. When I am deciding whether or not I'm going to audition for a role in a show, I do something that not everybody always does. A lot of times for auditions, you're tasked with doing what's called cold reading, where you see the script for the first time and you do your best to get through it. So the director has a sense of maybe who you are if they're meeting you for the first time, what you sound like when you talk, can you react to others. But what I always do, no matter what the show is, no matter what the part is, I find that script ahead of time and I read the whole thing. I have to. A lot of people in community theater especially, there's a lot of reasons people act. There's a lot of reasons people try out for things since it's a non-professional world. They do it because they love it, because it makes them feel good to be up here. They have a lot of friends here. It's a social thing. For me, if I am in a show, it's about the story. It's about whether when I read a script, I respond to something in there that maybe I don't fully understand. There's a feeling that I get from it, or there's an idea that I want to pursue that I want to try to make sense of for myself, and then also maybe by making sense of it for myself, I can make sense of it for someone else. I tend to follow my gut and my interest in a script and then go from there, and I will especially try out for a show if I think there's something in there that I am uniquely qualified to try to wrestle with, whether it's an idea or an emotion, that then I can impart to an audience. Before I audition for a show, it's not about, am I going to have a great time, or do I want to be adored by an audience? It's, am I value added to this, and is there something I have that helps tell the story of this better, and I think it's a story worth telling. So that's what I look for when I'm thinking about trying out. So, okay, I've tried out, and guess what? I knocked it out of the park. I did great. A director goes, hey, I want to cast you in a show. So that gut feeling that I had, great, I've got it. Well, how do I impart that to someone else in the role that I'm cast in? Well, I think there's a danger when you're cast in something and you have a part, no matter whether it's big or small, you tend to focus on what your piece of the puzzle is. But the only way to know how it's going to fit in there is to know what the whole story is. How do you fit into the story? How are you a small part of a big design? It's really important to know not just who your character is, but also why it's there. What's the purpose of it? Find your place in that larger story, because storytelling, art, theater, it is all collaborative. There's no story to tell without somebody to listen to it. There's no thing you can do in a theater alone. You have to depend on other people to get there. Realizing that it is not just about you, ever. That can be found out in simple ways. For instance, if you are an actor and you're focusing on what you're doing in a show, especially if you get out in front of an audience, what you learn is that there are things you have to leave on the table that you really don't want to leave on the table. That can mean foregoing your moment in the spotlight to better tell the story. If it's comedy, you may have a sweetheart of a joke on the page and you think, I got the comic chops to really make this sing. But there's times where you have to let that go, because that big laugh you might score is going to kill the momentum that you need to tell the story better, or to get to an even better joke that someone else has. Same thing is true if you're in a heavy drama like a Shakespearean tragedy, and you know that you can really exercise yourself and have just this great dopamine hit of emotional catharsis by like really milking your to be or to not to be monologue. But something in the rawness of the emotion you're processing, or just the length of your pauses, it's killing what the scene is supposed to be about. Like, you can get so lost in acting it, you lose track of the story. And the story is what you can never, ever lose track of. A really valuable lesson that I have learned that's hard for an actor to take, because an actor always wants to make sense of every moment and feel every moment and have it be the truth for them. But a really valuable lesson is that the thing that feels the most powerful to you on stage as you're doing it may not translate to the audience at all. Also vice versa. Something that you do not feel completely connected to an audience, that can be their favorite moment in a show. It can be a moment that crystallizes what a story is about, or what thematic element is being brought out. I think of two kind of examples of this. For instance, as an actor, you're in a scene with other actors on stage, and you're on one side of the stage, and your blocking calls for you to make a cross. Like, you have to walk from one side of the stage to the other to accomplish what the director wants to see at the end of the scene. And no matter what you've done, you cannot square the circle. Like, you cannot make sense of, as an actor or a character, and no matter what the director tells you, you cannot figure out, well, I cannot make it seem natural to walk from here to there. But you got to do your best to try to bridge that gap, because what you don't know is outside of yourself. The audience is watching this, and your unnatural feeling crossed to the other place to stand there. It really put the whole puzzle together for somebody watching the show. Like, there's some stage picture that got created, or there's some piece of like thematic element that is now just boom, it's all there for them, and you had no idea. Another example is people in comedies, which I hear about quite a bit. Here in community theater, we have people who've been in 101 different comedies, and they are really good at kind of following the ebb and flow of an audience, and they really know how to hit a laugh line. So it can be very dispiriting for them sometimes. You'll hear them come off stage and go, gosh, my line, I know this is a really funny line, and I just got to milk it for all it's worth. And the audience tonight they gave me a little chuckle, but I can do better. But what they lose sight of sometimes, and I've done this as well, is that it's okay to get that little chuckle, because 45 seconds later, there's a huge laugh that is coming, maybe not from your character, but from someone else. And your little chuckle was sort of like the stepping stone to get there. So It's all about how it fits into the larger structure. It's not always just about you and what you're doing. Another tough thing for actors to hear sometimes is to know for certain you are not the primary reason that a person is watching a story be told. A person comes into your theater to see the story be told. You are a part of something that is much bigger than yourself. Now, when I talk about building a performance or acting in a show myself, I have one piece of advice for everybody. And it's one that's a little antithetical to a lot of what you hear or what you may think about yourself. And that is, do not be afraid to be yourself. I am not, as I've learned many, many times over, I am not what I would call a transformative actor. When you think about actors who transformative acting, it's somebody like maybe a Daniel Day-Lewis is one of the primary examples in modern life, somebody who always works from the outside in. It's all about the physicality of something. They transform themselves through behaviors, physicality, accent work, working with objects. And that accumulation of detail then comes back inward and they create a character that way. Guess what? That is not me at all. I am not a transformative actor. I always work from the inside out. And that means that I try to react to things as honestly as I can, not just as a character, but as myself. And then I try to kind of bridge the gap between how I feel about something and react to something to how a character in a story needs to react to something. And over time, we hopefully meet in the middle and work toward that. I used to feel that that type of acting, this non-transformational type of acting, meant that I was a bad actor, a lazy actor, because if I'm getting up on stage, it's like, oh, he's just being himself again. But I no longer really see it as a limitation anymore, because one thing it allows you to do that I think the other school of acting may not is to really be intuitive. By bridging the gap between yourself and a character, you really get to react in an honest way to it. Because when you're building from yourself and have to meet a character, no matter how close you are, you're not that character. So to meet that character, you have to demonstrate a certain amount of vulnerability to be able to identify with whatever the character requires. A character can be cruel, ugly, weak. For me, and the way I approach shows, that means I have to acknowledge those parts of myself to kind of meet them in the middle, and that does require a certain amount of vulnerability. Something else, when looking at a character and a story, is to embrace contradictions. When you think about people in your life or think about yourself, there's no person you know who is exactly one thing and one thing only. It's the same with characters in a story, especially a well-written story. When I direct shows and direct other actors, usually at the first meeting we have, where I'm meeting the cast, we're reading through a script, something I think people are sick of hearing me say is that every drama is a little bit funny, and there's something dramatic about every comedy. I really believe that. The contradictions are to be embraced. I think that some of the best comedies I've ever seen come from a place of underlying sadness or rage, or that there's fear within a character that a dream they have is about to be lost forever. And in a really solid tragedy, there can be moments of absurdity or beauty, or maybe at the edge of a frame, there's just darkness all around. There's just a little bit of hope for some light that can peek in. It may not make it all the way through, but there's got to be something there for me to balance everything out. I don't think any moment in your life is one thing and one thing only. You're surrounded every second of your day by contradictions, so use them. One of the last things I would say that I think makes you an effective actor and an effective storyteller that is easily overlooked because it's so simple is just to be prepared. It's unglamorous work to be prepared, but it frees you up to be a better storyteller later. For an actor, being prepared for me just means, as I've said before, reading that script over and over and over again to the point where you know your lines without having to think so much about them. So that when you're in a scene with another actor, another person, and you're required to tell this story, you are not having to go through the Herculean effort of like sweating out the lines or trying to remember, oh, I have to do this in the story because you know it. You know your lines, you know other people's lines. When I think back about the times that I have felt the most connected to an audience, over the years. It has been from that. The shows where I have really sort of let everything fall away and I've really connected in a scene or a moment, it's the ones that I knew backwards and forwards so that I was able to not have to think about it. And I've done the work ahead of time, and then I'm able to just be and intuit and behave and be loose. It's unglamorous doing that, but it sort of seeps into your muscle memory, and then you have it. As an actor, I think you can be so focused on the gratifying things, on the laughs and the catharsis, that you miss out on that, which is one of the fundamental components. It's unsexy, it's unfun, but sometimes the fireworks can obscure the fundamentals. So the goal for me as an actor, as a storyteller, is to arrive at a place where myself and who I am, my behavior, the behavior of a character, and the actions that a character need to perform all kind of come together as sort of equal sides of a prism that can reflect out the needs of the story and where the story needs to go. And sometimes more importantly, what the story's feeling is. When that happens, which it doesn't always, but when it does, that means that what I'm doing is simultaneously about me, but not about me at all, which is very gratifying. In all things artistic or when you're telling a story, I think the goal is to try to be the most yourself you can be, to drill down, to embrace the contradictions of yourself, the ugly parts of yourself, to be honest and go all the way down to the core of yourself, so that once you do that, you then get to be the vessel for something else that's not you at all.